evening, everybody. Thank you, Donald. Well, last night, at 10 o'clock on ITV, it was the Piers Morgan interview with Donald Trump. A fascinating interview. Overall, I thought a very good programme. In the first part of the interview, Piers did not press the president very hard, let him speak, let him say what he had to say, which actually I think generally with interviews is what people want. Let's hear what they've got to say. In the second part, he pushed him hard. He pushed him over the Britain First retweets. Trump explained, didn't know who they were, but if he had to apologise, he would. And it was all very good. But there was one question that I found really curious. Now, it could be that I'm hopelessly out of touch with society in this country, I don't know. But Piers asked President Trump whether he identified as a feminist.
No, I wouldn't say I'm a feminist. I mean, I think that would be maybe going too far. I'm for women, I'm for men, I'm for everyone.
OK, so Trump would not identify as a feminist. And then this morning, I was on with Piers on Good Morning Britain against Vince Cable, having a chat about Trump and whether he should be banned from coming to this country or not. And Piers asked me the same question, whether I would identify as a feminist.
Are you a feminist?
I didn't understand the question.
Are you a feminist?
I don't know what it means. How can I be?
You don't know what feminism means?
Well, you can be a feminist, I can't.
Really? A man can't be a feminist?
Piers calls himself a feminist.
Well, I wouldn't have thought so.
I identify as a feminist.
Well, I wouldn't, no. I would say, let everybody be equal, live in a fair society.
You're not a feminist either.
Is that feminism?
That's feminism.
What is feminism?
You tell me what you think feminism is.
Well, I don't know. You tell me what it is.
That's exactly it.
The one part of the
Everybody
interview
equal, living in a
I
fair
simply
society.
couldn't understand. Well, that was how my day started, having a debate about what feminism is. Why did I say what I said, and why do I think the president said what he said? Well, to begin with, I think that it's difficult for a man to identify as a feminist. It simply feels a very awkward thing to say. Secondly, I do genuinely wonder what the term feminism now means. It seems to me that perhaps it's been hijacked by some people who seem to have a rather anti-men and somewhat negative agenda. I think if the question was asked, do you believe in equal rights for men and women, the answer is simple, isn't it? Yes. And quite why we obsess on this word, on this label, I simply don't know. I've been fascinated ever since that interview that so many London-based media commentators have condemned me for not identifying as a feminist. And, folks, my view is that this is an issue on which the London media bubble has got it completely and utterly wrong. Men in this country don't want to identify as feminists. Actually, the vast majority of women don't want to identify as feminists because it's taken on these sort of overtones of being something that can be somewhat extreme, somewhat anti-men, and not perhaps particularly helpful. That is my view. That is what I think. I think it's a label that doesn't really work. But look, tell me that I am completely and utterly wrong. Tell me that you, whether you're a man or a woman, identify as a feminist, and do so by calling me on 0345 6060 973. Maybe like me, you agree the term has been hijacked and turned into a negative, in which case text to 84850, or if you think it might be more useful just to talk about genuine equality of opportunity for everybody, and that actually the word feminist is not helping any of this, then, you can tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, and of course you can watch us on Facebook, and you can comment there too. Mick from Wallington says, Nigel, if things carry on like this, there will be a gender war in the West, but in the UK in particular, says Mick in Wallington. Mick, I don't agree, because I think this identification, and, generally, I think Piers Morgan is a really, really good journalist. He succeeded in this country. He had a show on CNN in the States. I think Piers is very, very much better than most people you see on television at working out what the nuts and bolts of an issue are in every way. But I think on this, he's got it wrong. I agree, Nigel. The term feminist has been distorted out of all recognition, totally misappropriated, says Susie in Southwark. Siobhan from Sevenoaks is a new caller to the show. Good evening.
Hi, Nigel. Big fan.
Well, it's very sweet of you to say that. Now, Siobhan, am I in the 19th century? Have I got this completely wrong when I say that I won't identify as a feminist?
No, I don't think you've got it wrong, because I think it's just being portrayed like just not what it's supposed to be at the moment. Like, I completely agree. It's like more now anti-men, whereas feminism's really about equality, isn't it? They're not thinking about men's rights at all.
Well, I'm going to say something here, Siobhan, that is actually against me, which is the Oxford English Dictionary definition of feminism is the advocacy of women's rights on the grounds of equality of the sexes, and there's nothing to object to in that OED definition at all. I just think it's an awkward word for men to use, and it's been hijacked too.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, like, just the women shouting about they're just so anti-men, anti-white men, aren't they?
There does seem to be a little bit of that going on. and I mean, one of the arguments, of course, is that women are not paid equally, and there were certainly some distortions within the BBC, which appear to have been corrected. I mean, do you feel that there is still some unfairness out there in terms of what women are paid?
Well, I've personally never been felt discriminated, and I think with things like the BBC, surely they just pay the people who bring in the most views. So obviously Gary Lineker with Match of Day is going to be a big hit because it's so highly viewed, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the argument was Carrie Gracie was the China... The argument was Carrie Gracie was the China correspondent, and she was being paid less than John Sopel, the North American correspondent, and the argument was made that one was paid more because he was a man.
Yeah, well, I just think surely they just... Well, I think these days they just base it on who brings in the most views and hits, really.
Yeah, so do you think generally, Siobhan, do you think we've got the balance of equality of the sexes more or less right in society?
I think there is still stuff to work on, but it's both ways, really. I mean, when it comes to having kids, women will always have longer maternity leave than men. And how's that right, really? Because, you know, men should have as much right for leave.
Well, I think that actually is changing, and I think paternity rights have changed and improved, although I would argue, and I know there is this phenomenon of new man, but an awful lot of men aren't actually much use with newborns, are they?
Oh, well, yeah.
Well, hands up, I was useless, but you know, again, some are, some aren't. But overall, Siobhan, I thank you for your call. And Siobhan, they're making the point that actually it has been hijacked by a group of people, in her words, who don't particularly like, in particular, white men. Henry is a new caller from Oxford in Surrey. Good evening, Henry.
Good evening, Nigel.
So, was I wrong to say that I'm not a feminist?
I think so, yeah. I think it was however uncomfortable you feel about it, it's quite an easy answer.
Well,
someone asks you in an interview, you're a feminist, and what they mean by that is, do you agree with equal rights for women? And you just say yes.
Well, I
Simple.
did.
You've dug yourself a big old hole.
Well, hang on. I did say, if you listen to that exchange, and by the way, I was being grilled as if I'd advocated some appalling barbaric practice. I mean, it was as if
you're always going to get grilled, mate, because you're a controversial figure.
Well, I accept that, and that's why they want me on the programme. Obviously, it's fine.
Yeah.
But I did say in that clip that I believe in equality for all.
Yeah, and then Susanna Reid said that's what it means. So you are, by definition, a feminist.
And I have, Henry, I've just conceded with the previous caller in the town down the A25 from you in Sevenoaks. I've just conceded that there is an Oxford English Dictionary definition that does fit that view, and yet, Henry, as a man, I don't feel comfortable with that word.
Well, what makes you feel threatened about it? You're fine. You're a very successful man. You've not been held back by any sort of female uprising, have you?
No, and nor have I, Henry, been held back in any way on interviews by having interviewers put words in my mouth that I didn't feel comfortable with.
No, all right.
You know,
I think it's as simple as you just agree. It's like I don't know, if there was some sort of anti-racism word, like we're all anti-racist, and if there was a word that a group had hijacked, as you say. I don't think there's some sort of hardcore of women who have hijacked the word. Feminists are militant since day one. You know, feminists are, bra burning and all of that stuff. They've been militant since day one. But feminism now doesn't mean what feminism used to mean. because equal rights are more prevalent now.
Well, I think that's right. I mean, Henry, tell me something. If you were asked that question, if your boss at work asked you that question...
Straight away agree. They wouldn't even question it.
Right, so you would...
Because I wouldn't want anyone to think that I was sexist.
Right.
Whatever I think about it, outwardly I would just agree.
Would you? Okay.
Yeah, I would, yeah, especially if I was on a live morning TV programme.
Okay, well, and do you think, Henry, that the majority of people would say yes just to get it out of the way and not have any aggro?
I think so, yeah.
All right.
Maybe that's a sad thing, but I think so.
Well, I don't know. Listen, sometimes avoiding conflict is a very, very smart idea. When he asked Trump that, I just thought it was a very awkward, strange question. Of course, Trump wasn't going to say yes. And I kind of thought going in this morning, I wonder whether he'll ask me that question. And hey, sure enough, he did. I didn't feel comfortable, Henry. I could have batted it away. I chose not to. But I take it. Henry from Oxted says I should simply have said yes and not have had the argument. Just because a word has been used as a negative, because of a small proportion of radical people who distort ideas, does not mean the word doesn't represent the values it always did. I get by text that I can't disagree with the logic of that. I still didn't feel comfortable. Susan on Facebook says, it's about equality. We all know that men have strengths that women don't possess, but women too have strengths that men don't possess. Equality is respecting both sexes for their particular strengths. Well, equality is respecting both sexes, Susan, is genuinely believing in equal opportunities for all. But you know something? You don't need to have a label put on you to believe in those things, in my opinion. And I was not going to bow down to the PC gods this morning. And I think Piers Morgan on this issue is out of touch with the public and not me. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:15. I caused shock and horror in the Good Morning Britain studios this morning when I refused to self-identify as a feminist in response to Piers Morgan, who does. And, it was as if I'd advocated some awful, brutal, barbaric act. Sucks was the shock, not just in that studio, but amongst so much of the London media. Of course, they're all feminists, whether they're men or women. And I'm sorry, I think it's a very uncomfortable word for men to use. Interestingly, Kelly from Wiltshire sends in a text. She identifies as a left-wing feminist and says, Nigel, you're right. Men cannot be feminists. They can be feminist allies. Well, I would rather agree with that if it comes to equality and fairness of all kinds. I also said I felt the word had been hijacked and perhaps did not now represent in the minds of most people what the Oxford English Dictionary says, which is the advocacy of women's rights on the grounds of equality of the sexes. No problem. I mean, try this from Germaine Greer. All men hate some women some of the time, and some men hate women all of the time. And how ironic that Germaine Greer herself, as a feminist, was recently banned from a university for being seen as anti-transgender. She says, as a feminist, a man who self-identifies as a woman is not a woman. Try this from Robin Morgan. I feel that man-hating is an honourable and viable political act, that the oppressed have a right to class hatred against the class that is oppressing them. I mean, it's not very pretty stuff, isn't it? If life is to survive on this planet, there must be a decontamination of the earth. I think this will be accompanied by an evolutionary process that will result in a drastic reduction of the population of males. Mary Daly. Can you folks see why I think the label feminism is unhelpful and why I think the media class in London have got this wrong? I don't believe that most of you living real lives outside the media bubble would use the word feminist. That's my view. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm a dinosaur from the 19th century. Call 0345 6060 973. If you want to have a go, ring that number. Colin, a new caller to the show, is calling from Ipswich. Good evening, Colin.
Good evening, Nigel. Pleasure to talk to you.
Pleasure to have you on the line. So was I wrong? Should I have bowed down to the PC gods this morning, Colin?
Absolutely not. No, you're absolutely right. It's pointless to have feminism at the moment because men and women already have equal rights. So there's nothing to fight for there, really. So it's humanism, really. It's not feminism.
Well, they have equal rights under the law, Colin, and that's absolutely right. Do you think they have equal rights in all regards, or is there still a bit of ground to make up?
No, I don't think so. I think there's equal opportunity for everyone. But if you give people equal opportunities, you don't get equal outcomes. So the feminists have been basically hijacked by neo-Marxists and identity politics.
Yes.
So they want to have equal outcomes for everyone, which is impossible without an oppressive state.
And why do you think, Colin, it is that women on average earn a bit less than men, maybe a fifth less than men?
Well, because that's an interesting one. They talk about the pay gap and women on average, but there is no such thing as an average woman. So men and women earn different amounts all across the board. So it's just a consequence of people making different choices in their lives. So there's that's when you add up all the wages for men and all the wages for women and divide it down, there's a slight difference. That's because of people making different choices in their lives.
I mean, I got in terrible trouble, Colin, once for this. I said that when I worked as a broker in the city in the commodities business, I would never take a fortnight's holiday. I dare not take a fortnight's. I'd take a week, but a fortnight I felt I would lose customers, people would go off elsewhere and do their business, and that it was a disadvantage for women in that business if they took several months off to have a baby, they came back, and they'd find themselves commercially in a weaker place. And you'd think, Colin, for all the world, I'd said something dreadful.
Yes, exactly. Yes, I mean, and it's not as if that women don't make it to the top. Many women do, but not many women want to make the sort of sacrifices that those women have done to make it to the top, and just as men have made sacrifices.
Yeah, I think actually, Colin, isn't it true that more men are prepared to sacrifice their family life to achieve economic and professional success than women, who perhaps put a higher emphasis on the family?
Yes, I mean, because, again, it's these sort of identity politics that seems to think that equality equals sameness, and it doesn't. Yeah. Men and women are different.
Well, actually, men and women are different, Colin. I think men, generally, are much more selfish than women. That's my view.
There is that.
I speak for myself, you know. Colin, I thank you very much indeed for your call. Peter from Carnforth says to me, I'd have given the same response as you. The reason being, I still don't know what the word means. Nigel, I'm not a feminist, and I am a woman. People need to get a life. There are other issues we should be discussing. Brexit is one. Laura, I'm trying to make this a Brexit-free zone this evening, and you come on and spoil it. Hannah is calling from Sutton, yet another new caller to the Nigel Farage Show. Good evening, Hannah.
Good evening, Nigel. I think you've neglected to identify the actual progression, some of the progressive movements that feminism has actually made. So in first wave feminism, in 1918 we get the vote. Second wave feminism, 60s, 70s, a lot of the legislation changes. That's more of the instrumental tools, and that was quite a clear-cut women should have this ability within society to have the vote or to be protected by legislation. And then third wave feminism, which is what we get into now, is the changing landscape of giving people choice and broadening that debate into allowing people to come at it from different perspectives. So the instrumental tools, I think, in first and second wave feminism wasn't enough to fully progress society. It kind of gave the underlining instruments to do that, and people recognised it. But the debate needs to move into those attitudes within society, and that's why I think it's still absolutely key, because things like, I guess you were talking about quotas earlier on the show, things like that. So you can put the tools in place where you just say it's a yes, no, okay, we need to get more women in, but it's not just that, it's the underlining attitudes that need to change, and that's what third wave feminism is all about. So
okay. Hannah, listen, I'm not for one moment going to try and counter anything you've just said, that feminism has had some amazing achievements, getting the vote clearly being one of them, and women's massive contribution in World War I being one of the things that helped, of course, with that. But Hannah, do you understand why it's difficult for a male of the species to associate with that word?
No.
You don't?
No, not at all. because I think men are absolutely integral to it, because it is a movement within society, and you need the mobilisation of everybody, the same way that I would identify or I would be involved with civil rights and anti-racism. I'm a white woman, but I think to fully progress it, you need everybody on board.
Hannah, if I said to you, I believe in equality of opportunity, absolutely, for men and women, but I will not use the word feminist about myself because I feel uncomfortable. Do you think I've done something wrong in saying that?
I think you're not understanding what feminism is.
Okay.
I think to not identify with that, I think you're not recognising what it is trying to achieve.
Well, fair or unfair, Hannah, I take what you say, and in many ways, that's the answer I gave Piers Morgan this morning. Perhaps I have a bit to learn, I don't know. Maybe Patricia from Diss in Norfolk, another new caller. They're all new callers tonight. Patricia, was I completely wrong to say that I'm not a feminist?
No, I cannot understand why a man should be called a feminist. I think we are different species. We're men and we're women. And why do we all have to clone each other? I mean, I just think it's ridiculous that we can't have the respect for a man and the respect for a woman. I've been a director of a company, and I must agree with the pay parity. That's always been a bit of a bone of contention. But I love having the door held open for me by a gentleman. I don't expect to turn out on a rainy day and rob the drains, though. And to me, this is all part of being a man and being a woman. And I consider myself to be a feminist because I will stand up for feminist issues. But it's just gone too far.
So, Patricia, let's get this right. I'm going to tease you now. So, you want to be equal in pay and everything else, but you still want the door held open for you?
Yes, of course. But
you want to have your cake and eat it, Patricia, don't you?
No, I don't. I'm doing laundry for my husband and pressing shirts. I don't say he's got to do that. There are certain things I do better and certain things that he can do better.
Yes, but men calling themselves feminists does feel a bit odd, doesn't it?
It feels very odd.
I agree with you. Patricia,
Anyway, vive la différence.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Patricia, thank you very much indeed. And James says, asking someone if they are a feminist is a really stupid question, especially from a presenter. You have done well to have a debate about this. Well, James, I looked at that interview with Trump last night. I wondered why Piers was asking the question. I was surprised he asked me that question again this morning. And I think that Piers Morgan and much of the media, lovey class, have got this wrong. I don't think most blokes out there would ever begin to call themselves feminists, and I now think a lot of women wouldn't call themselves feminists because I think they think this word has been hijacked. That's what I think. If you think I'm totally wrong, call 0345 6060 973. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:30. I refuse to identify as a feminist on Good Morning Britain with Piers Morgan, and you'd think I'd advocated something truly beastly. And a lot of the media berate me for it, but I still insist that actually the word feminist is a very awkward term for men to use. They're just not comfy with it, and that actually many women now don't like the term feminism because it's been hijacked by some, and actually equality of opportunity is what we're really talking about. Meanwhile, in Brussels, the General Affairs Council of the European Union met for a whole 2 minutes. You know, we're always told it takes ages to take decisions in Brussels. 2 minutes they met, and they agreed after 2 minutes that the United Kingdom could, at the end of the Article 50 process, have a transition period that lasted up until the end of 2020, provided that, well, here's Michel Barnier.
All of the acquis, the economic status quo, the European policies will be maintained between the 30th of March 2019 and the 31st of December of 2020. During that period, the decisions will apply.
Oh, yeah.
And the UK must acknowledge and accept these rules of the game from the outset.
We must acknowledge and accept. And you know what, folks? We'll go on paying about £10 billion a year. We'll keep all the rules. We'll have to accept new ones. The court will have judgment. We'll continue to have open borders. In fact, we're about to enter a period of taxation without representation. No wonder it took them 2 minutes to make that decision. But hey, enough of Brexit. Because we're having a rest from Brexit tonight. We are on to the term feminism. Jean says, I like having doors opened and my bags carried. Does that mean I'm not a feminist? No, Jean, you can be both. And I was teasing the caller before the break that she wanted to have her cake and eat it. Liz says, are there any menimists out there? Oh, gosh, good Lord, no. No. In fact, after the President's Club dinner, which we saw so much publicity about, where it seems half a dozen people behaved at best oafishly, at worst perhaps even criminally. It seems there is now a tide saying that men shouldn't even attend stag events, shouldn't even have men-only dinners. Somehow that's wrong. And now we're told that even the women that come on, the bikini-clad women, before the World Darts Championships, they're all going to lose their jobs. No doubt it'll go from boxing too, and the net effect of all of this is thousands of women doing work that is perfectly respectable will lose their jobs. Congratulations, everybody. It's all worked out nicely. Wendy says there are some decent men on this planet. Thank you, Wendy. Do men comfortably identify as feminists? Indeed, do a majority of women identify as feminists these days? I'm going to go to Richard, another new caller from Woodford Green. Good evening, Richard.
Good evening, Nigel. I'm a 76-year-old man.
Yep.
I would jump for joy at being asked that question.
Yep.
Are you a feminist? Because I am. I only saw Good Morning Britain from 6 till 7 this morning, so I missed seeing you on
10
it.
past I was on, Richard. You couldn't wait.
Awful. Nigel, I'm a feminist because I have such admiration and always have all my life for women. Generally speaking, and I underline the word generally,
Yep.
Generally speaking, women do 3 jobs. Unlike you or I, who don't do 1 job. Generally speaking, women run a household, bring up a family, and more times than not, go out to work as well. They do 3 jobs, we do 1. So my admiration for women is actually unsurpassed. So this is the call that's eventually come to me admitting and wanting to be known as a feminist.
No, it's interesting.
That's my case.
No, Richard, look, I've already said on this show already that I think men are far more selfish than women.
Selfish.
And I think it's true. And you're right. And funny, and I'm going to say this, and no doubt really upset lots of people now, but if you go to rural France in the summer, you see these men sitting in the town squares, drinking coffees in the morning, beers in the afternoon, playing pool. They spend all day there. The women do everything. So I certainly, when it comes to rural France, Richard, I think you're right. The women do more. But what's interesting is, so you find, Richard, no discomfort in using the word feminist about yourself?
I absolutely love the term being applied to me.
Okay. Do you understand why a lot of blokes find that really awkward?
Well, you used the word selfish, and lots of men are selfish.
Okay. Would you accept, Richard, that probably the percentage of men that would use the term feminist about themselves is quite small?
Yes, I would accept that. I think I'm in a real minority.
Okay, no. Well, Richard, I think you're in a real minority, but you've stated your case beautifully and in many ways pretty unarguably when it comes to what men do and what women do. And in a moment, I will reveal a major piece of polling on this issue. What interested me, Richard, and the reason for having this debate tonight, is I think once again we get a piece of language used by the media in London who think it's monstrous not to identify with this term, and they're out of touch generally with the rest of society. Richard, charming phone call. Thank you very much indeed. How long will it be before a leading female feminist accuses a man of being patronising and disingenuous for claiming to be a feminist? Asked Chris from Coulsdon. Well, Richard, I think, would have no problem, whatever you said to him. He's happy to be a feminist. He's a 76-year-old man, and he's very proud of it. He's got good reasoning. But believe me, Believe me, the media, peers, the others are wrong on this. I'll give you the polling in a moment, but not before I go to Lee, another new caller to the show, who's calling from Wrexham. Good evening, Lee.
Oh, hi, Nigel. I listen to the programme on a regular basis, you know.
Welcome.
I find it interesting, and that I wish we weren't having this argument, because I agree to a degree with the previous guy. You know, I see women as very hard-working people, and but you know, look around you in the world. You know, the things that are advanced, you know, for women. You know, washing machines. I used to fix them.
Right.
And I used to go to houses, and I'd be dragged in by desperate women. You know, fix the washing machine. Your husband can go.
Yes, Les. Okay, keep going. Yeah.
Just get your washer fixed. You know, because these things have made life easier for women, and you know, we provide. What I'm trying to say is, we provide. You know, since cavemen days, we provide. You can come out of your central heated house, you get into your car, you drive down the motorway to the airport, you get into a plane, you go to a lovely hotel in the warmth somewhere. You know, we provide all these things. What about a little thank you instead of all this warring, you know, that seems to be going on?
Les, you know, you're talking about the sort of traditional relationship where the man provides and the woman's at home. I think things have changed quite a bit since then. I also suspect, Les, quite a few women could actually fix the washing machine themselves and not just the blokes. So, Les, if I ask you, Les, would you identify as a feminist? I get a big no, would I?
Yeah, there's a word called femininity, and in my dictionary it starts off with modesty, and it goes down a huge list of female attributes, you know. And
modesty.
What I'm trying to say is, I appreciate femininity, and you know, I don't want to be at war with the females.
No, and Les, you know, I'm pleased you've called. I'm pleased you're a fairly regular listener to the show. The reason we're having this debate is I want to prove a point. I want to prove that so much of the media output we get from London on television, radio, and through the newspapers is hopelessly out of touch with this country, Les, and that's how I feel. Thank you. Gregory is calling from Ealing. Good evening, Gregory.
Hello, Nigel. Good to speak to you.
Good to speak to you.
I think we need a bigger picture here of what's actually going on. I mean, this is the latest manifestation, I think, of what was known in the 1930s as critical theory, otherwise popularly known as political correctness, and it's been a steady plan to subvert Western society, to destroy tradition, to destroy the family, to destroy our religious heritage, and this is the way it's going, and this is just the latest episode in what was devised in the 1930s by the so-called Frankfurt School in Germany. It then was kicked out by the Nazis, and it went to America, and then it infiltrated all our institutions.
Open society, Gregory. Open society. This is what the sort of theories these people. So was I right, Gregory, not to bow down to the PC gods this morning and not say that I was a feminist just to please the media?
Of course you were. These people, these journalists, live in their journalistic bubbles. They think they represent the rest of us. They don't. People are absolutely sick of them, and we need people like you to actually stand up for the overwhelming majority. So please carry on doing it.
Gregory, do you know what? What you've just said is right, and I am going now to reveal massive opinion polling on this subject conducted in 2016. Well, I will in a moment, but for now, you're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, and it's 7:45. So, are Piers Morgan and the media set in London right when they say it's the correct thing to do to identify as being a feminist, regardless whether you're male or female, or do the general population, as I suspect, and me in my case, feel they just don't want to use the word? Well, fascinatingly, back in 2016, the Fawcett Society, which is a leading feminist charity, carried out a really substantial poll about the F word. Yes, 8,000 people were surveyed, so a really massive representative sample. And let me tell you, the percentage of men in this country that identified as feminists was 4%. That's right, Piers. 96% of men do not identify as feminists. Amazingly, only 9% of women identified as feminists. And I think that's because the term has been degraded. You know, it's not about campaigning for the vote or for laws to change. There's a feeling it's been hijacked by many. And very interestingly, the charity's chief executive said in 2016, the overwhelming majority of the public share our feminist values but don't identify with the label. And that's how I felt on Good Morning Britain this morning. I didn't like the label, and I think the label is harder for a man to use than it is for a woman. It does not mean, because you refuse to identify as a feminist, you don't believe in equal opportunity for all. Simon says, feminism has quite obviously been hijacked by the bourgeois snowflake brigade, and Diana, who I think is looking to really wind everybody up, says, well, I'm completely mixed up. I like walking past building sites and being wolf whistled. In fact, I go back for another go. What does that make me? Likely to be shouted out by lots of our callers, I think, in the next 10 minutes. Natalie is the next caller, calling from Epping, another new caller. Good evening, Natalie.
Good evening. Hi. I'm calling just because first I wanted to introduce myself. I educate children for a living, but I'm not a teacher because that's a bit too strong of a word.
Okay.
It's the equivalent of what you're saying, isn't it? So you're saying that you believe that men and women should have political and social and economic equality.
Yes.
But you don't think you're a feminist, yet you just read out the definition of a feminist as a...
I read out I read out, Natalie, the Oxford English Dictionary definition of a feminist, and I did it against myself, and I said it was against myself, because actually I've got no problem with the words at all. I just feel awkward as a man to use a word that implies femininity, and I also think it's been somewhat hijacked.
Don't you think the awkwardness may come from the men or women who aren't maybe confident enough to go and research a term, look into feminism, look at the kind of pros it does and the things it tries to tackle? Because it tackles not only women's issues, but men's issues too. Earlier you said, for instance, that you thought men were selfish, and you also said that you thought that young children, when they're new, are pretty useless at that. I think that's horrendously offensive towards men. I think men are brilliant fathers, just as much as I would be a brilliant mother. I don't think that...
Well, maybe I've been offensive. Maybe I've been offensive, Natalie.
Your ability to be a parent.
Maybe I've been offensive to some men.
Okay, maybe it's not the offence that's the important. It's what you're actually saying. You're saying that men don't have the ability to raise children like women do, and I think that's wrong. I also think women have a place in the workplace like men do. And the previous caller who said about fixing washing machines, for instance, suggesting that women are the only ones who wash their clothes. I don't think men go around not washing their clothes. And you said about it being hijacked as a term, but that would be like all Muslim people not calling themselves dedicated to Islam anymore because of radical extremists on Islamic front, and or yourself as a right-wing supporter not calling yourself a right-wing person.
Well, Natalie, you tell me this. You tell me this, right? And I'm listening to your arguments very carefully. You tell me this. Why is it on that massive Fawcett Society poll that only 9% of women identify as feminist?
I think maybe because we're not maybe talking about it enough in a more positive way. And I think because the media will often show the radicalisation of all groups. So when people hear the word feminist, people who are close to myself as well, my own auntie and grandparents don't identify as feminist because they don't understand what the term means, because they've been bombarded by really radical feminists, or Germaine Greer, for instance, who's not maybe a representation of our everyday feminists, and women and men who see the importance of the unconscious bias in society and the issues that we face. It's about being equal for all, like you're talking about, but I don't think radical feminism is a good idea personally, much like I don't think radical anything is a good idea.
Would it be helpful to find a new term, do you think?
I don't think so. I think if you lose the kind of term that's connected to the groups that did so much in the first place, and you've given in to the radicalisation, you've given in to the hatred.
Yeah, no, I get that. It's rather like I was told years ago, don't fly the Union Jack, because that's what the extreme right wing fly. And I said, well, the hell with it, I'm going to fly the Union flag, and actually over the country people do. So you're right to say that a term should not be hijacked and should not lose its original purpose, and I'm sure the Pankhurst and others would be horrified, to hear that women don't support feminism 100 years on from getting the vote. But Natalie, it is remarkable, isn't it, that only 9% of women identify in that way?
Well, you said 8,000 people. There's far more many people in the UK than 8,000.
No, hang on.
8,000.
8,000 was supposed to be a representative sample conducted by a reputable polling company. So we take it with some truth in it, yeah?
Well, it's not scientific fact. There's loads of validity issues with all sorts of polling. It's self-reporting. People don't understand the questions. There's all sorts of issues.
All right. So what you're saying, Natalie, is reclaim the word feminism and make it respectable again, yeah?
Yes.
Fine. No, listen, I understand that. That makes a lot of sense to me. Thank you. I still personally am going to find it very difficult as a man to identify, but a very rational argument there. Stuart is calling from Torquay. Good evening, Stuart.
Hi, Nigel. I just want to make a very basic point, which is slightly different from your previous caller, which is the fact that I have 4 daughters, 1 son, 5 or 6 nephews, and probably, there's so many I can't count, but it's over 10 nieces anyway.
Right.
And I would be mortified if any of them treated each other differently down to their sex, because I just think everyone is equal. However, by the same token, I don't really see anything wrong with with me and my wife. You know, my wife's on a pedestal to me. I don't think that she's any better than me in certain ways, and I'm not any better than her. Or there's certainly no restrictions on down to sex. So I just think everything gets so complicated nowadays with everything that goes on. There's nothing wrong with...
Stuart, I wasn't making an argument. I was not making an argument against the equality of opportunity. I argued for that on the programme, and yet I was kind of sort of rounded on as if I'd done something awful for not saying that I was a feminist. And Stuart, I genuinely think that with a lot of these social issues, what you read in your newspapers, listen to on your radio, see on your television, is the view of a London media bubble that is actually out of touch with Torquay and the real country.
And I would totally agree with that. It's just, to me, I'd see, you know, we're not in the dark ages or anything like that. Everybody is equal. It doesn't matter whether you're male or female or whether you're foreign or whatever. You know, it makes absolutely no difference. I just don't think there should be any problem in treating people.
No, of course. It's just that label, Stuart, isn't it? It's that label. Feminism has got a label that people don't find attractive.
Well, I don't understand. Does it make me a feminist? In the fact that, like, well, you know, at the end of the day, like I said, I've got 4 daughters. You know what I mean? I know.
That's the question.
I want their husbands to love them.
I think a lot of people who were asked that question, Stuart, as I was this morning, as you would be, find it difficult. Thank you. Would it not have been easier, I'm asked here, to ask the question of what his definition of feminism was? Then you could have given a proper answer. I did. I kept asking them. I'm going to go to Ben, my last caller of the evening. Another new caller. Everyone tonight, bar one's been a new caller. So listen, folks, if you think it's tough to get through, ring and we will prioritise, because we can see on our screen whether you called before, we will prioritise new callers because we want to get you involved. Ben from Sutton, good evening.
Hello, Nigel. I just want to say that I love what you do and please keep doing it. So the problem I think with feminism is that it's become about equality of outcome.
Yes.
And I particularly want to raise the problem of state intervention. So when I think the UK state has amended the Equality Act to force companies to publish gender pay gap information, and I think that this has kind of, for example, guilt-tripped companies into setting gender hiring targets. So what, for example, you know, EasyJet is a company with a big gender pay gap because all the pilots are male, all the females are in management and administration.
Generally, not all, but generally, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so generally, yeah. So they set a gender hiring target for pilots now. So actually, the feminist agenda is actually erecting gendered hiring barriers where there were none before.
Ben, we're almost out of time. Quick question for you. Is the term feminist now unhelpful and awkward?
It is, isn't it? Because
I think so. Ben, I'm going to have to leave you there. We're done. Folks, tonight I have been willfully abusive about men at every stage of this show, and not one of you has rung up to tell me off. It's a funny old world we live in, isn't it? You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. I'm back tomorrow night at 7. Coming up at 10 tonight, it's Ian Collins. But up next, it's Clive Bull.
Nigel, thank you. So at 9 tonight, it's the Business Hour. Advice if you're starting up a business.